Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you. So a new minister at First Church, his first job was to go around to all the homes and make personal visits, social calls, to get to know the people. And it was going really well, but then he arrived at the Joneses' door, and it was obvious that someone was home, but no one came when he knocked on the door. He called out, "Mr. and Mrs. Jones, Pastor John." Nothing happened. Finally, he took out his card, and he wrote on the back, Revelation 3:20, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come into him." And then he put it on the door. That next Sunday, that very same card somehow found it into the offering plate. It was given to the pastor, and he looked on the back, and underneath his quote was another. It said Genesis 3:10. "And he said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid, because I was naked, and I hid myself." So that was all a precursor to say that we're going to do a little metaphysical Bible right now. I know that many people come into Unity with some old religious wounding about, particularly from the fundamentalist upbringing that many of us had. And I'm so grateful that I was able to kind of heal that and come out on the other side where I haven't thrown the baby out with the bathwater, that there is a lot of deep, deep wisdom in these ancient teachings. And I want to share some with you today. I want to talk, this is week 5 of our Touchstone series, and the last 4 weeks. So people are enjoying the Touchstone series. I love that. Thank you. The last 3 weeks, I've been exploring these different lenses or windows onto our individual soul, ways that we can discern who we truly are at our most essential selves, which will then give us information about the way we would choose to spend our days and our hours in the time that we have left here in this human experience. And that's the whole point of this, is that if we can get in touch with our authentic nature, we might just discover our purpose for being and be of service in the world, in our families, and in our church in a different way. Today we're talking about values. We talked about desire, interest, gifts and talents, and today we're talking about values. And I think this is probably the most closely linked to the soul. These are the things that matter the most. As a matter of fact, the talk title today is What do you value most? What matters in your life? And I was thinking about values, and this is what the dictionary says. It's a person's principles or standards of behavior. It's one's judgment of what is important in life. The things that we hold in high importance. And I want to tell you that the ego knows nothing about this. We've been sharing that other lens is about the ego awareness and soul awareness. The ego is that part of you that tells you to spend money you don't have, to buy the things you don't need, to impress the people you don't like. It really knows nothing about what is of lasting and meaning and value in your life. But there is a part of you that does know what matters, what is most important. And the way I've come to understand it and feel my way into it is that really what we're seeking to do is bring the qualities of God into our lives, to experience who God is as us. And because God is infinite, each of us has a different mix of the values, of the qualities of the divine. Each of us has a different sense of maybe priority and importance, and that is beautiful. That your unique soul, that if you're listening and you can discover what those core values are, it will help you understand who you are in God. Over 2,000 years ago, a young rabbi, barely 30 years old, had developed a bit of a reputation as being an amazing teacher and a little bit of a fly in the ointment to the powers that be. And healing followed where he went, miraculous transformational experiences. Of course, I'm speaking about Jesus of Nazareth, and There's a lot that's been said about Jesus since those days, and a lot of it is just BS, belief system. It's not actually accurate or historical or true to this amazing being. The piece that I'm about to read, 12 verses from the chapter 5 of Matthew, it's the opening to what we call the Sermon on the Mount. Now, it's not known if this was delivered in one speech, but of all of the source texts, all of the archaeological evidence, this is the best distillation of what this beautiful man actually taught and said. So I'd just like to read the first 12 verses of chapter 5 of Matthew. And let's just imagine for a moment, I've set this scene for us before in another talk, but it just feels right that we are living in an ancient time. We're on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, and there is a rise in the land, and this young rabbi has decided to move to the top of that hill so that his voice will carry to all of us. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountainside and he sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach, and he said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. Blessed are they who are persecuted for righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." Now, there are at least a year of sermons in those 12 verses. But I just want to talk about the tone. Nowhere in there does Jesus say anything about status, spending money you don't have to get things you don't need. Nowhere in there is there any thought of worldly power or dominion or none of that. As a matter of fact, he doesn't even talk about physical healing or attracting your soulmate. Nothing like that. The tone is of humility and compassion. You see, humility is not being less than, humility is being right size. And what Jesus was saying, which I believe is in perfect alignment with what we've been teaching and what we've been learning in this series, is to get out of the head, to set the ego aside in its need for power and significance, and come to a deeper place within us where we know we are here to connect. We are here to hunger and thirst after righteousness, to find the right, to seek the right and best way to live. That's what we're doing here. And the mourning, that's a big one right now. We've experienced so much loss. Blessed are they who mourn, they will be comforted. And I want to focus today, I believe all of these represent deeply spiritual values of compassion and humility and spiritual seeking. But it's really verse 8 that I want to focus on. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And I don't know about you, but I don't feel too pure most of the time. That I still struggle, carbohydrates, and other things. I struggle. I have moments of expanded peace and awareness of oneness in all life, and then moments where, it's the Atlanta Braves, really? No. But I was, in my other spiritual reading this week, I came across this Ernest Holmes affirmation based on verse 8 of chapter 5 of Matthew, and he just says this as an affirmation: I am pure in heart, and I see God everywhere. Repeat after me. I am pure in heart, and I see God everywhere. This is the key to discovering your core value. Purity of heart doesn't mean perfection in human word and speech. but it does mean a deep commitment to being the best you that you are. And when we commit to being our best selves, then what it does is it changes the way we see the world. And instead of seeing a problem on the 5 o'clock news, we see a prayer request. Instead of seeing insurmountable obstacles in our lives, we see opportunities for our growth. We see God's presence everywhere. So this is purity of heart, is to know that this is the access point between our soul, the world, and spiritual power. When we align ourselves with the truth of who we are and fix our vision on that truth, then the world is transformed in ways that are astounding. And maybe not in the timing and the exact ways that our limited human perspective would like to see. You know, I just have this feeling that when Jesus got the download, when he realized, and I want you to know too that Christ was not his last name. Did you know that? That it was the power that he decided or chose him, and he was willing to step into the energy of Christedness. And when you're thinking about the tradition, even the traditional Christian view of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, if you just make Jesus God, you're missing the point. Because don't put him in heaven too soon, as Richard Rohr says. That Jesus is fully human and fully divine. The meeting place of the humanity and the divinity. And that is the way shower. That is the invitation for all of us to step into that. And I can imagine that when Jesus saw the oppression of the Roman Empire upon his people, when he saw the sanctimoniousness of the religious powers that be, and I'm sure that he thought, this is just hopeless. I quit. But instead, he sought the truth, and then he began to teach it. I wonder if he knew that 2,000 years later, we're still seeking to live by those teachings. That the words he spoke may not have overthrown the Roman Empire, at least not for another 400 years, but that something that in the truth he brought would continue to reverberate through time and through humanity. And I think that's the invitation for us today too. That if we're willing to find our pure heart, to live our values, we may not see the world right itself in exactly the way we want, but we trust that we are a part of the evolution of spiritual nature of reality that will continue beyond what we're doing, that we're a part of the wave of awakening into our common humanity and our spiritual destiny. And it happens through each of us, maybe not in such a profound and visible way as Jesus of Nazareth, but we're all called to find that pure heart and deliver our values and to discover them and to experience them. And it happens uniquely, and we've been talking about this the whole series, that each one of us is a unique soul. As Jan Van Zant says, we are a fingerprint of God. That then we get to feel that divine blueprint or fingerprint expressed into body, mind, and spirit and heart. And that your unique nature is the path. Years ago, I was at the Big Sky Retreat, and we had Greg Montana come and do this beautiful work around heart virtue. Days and days of exercises and processes, and we all came away with 2 words. And he says, this is who you came to be. He called them heart virtues, but they are deep values. Mine were compassion and authenticity. And it just feels right. That I'm here to express and experience those things from the moment I drew breath to the moment I take my last breath. And there are other values in me. Community is a huge value for me. Spiritual learning, growth, healing, those are values. And the more that I live into those deeper places within me, the more fulfilled I feel, the more at home in my own skin I feel. Like I'm here being me. And as I talked about early in this program, and then that Michael-shaped space begins to show up where I get to give my gift and be met and affirmed by beautiful people and beautiful souls. Your uniqueness will be revealed. Your heart virtues or deepest values will be revealed to you both through the joy of discovery and through the heartbreak of being human. You know, there's an old saying in the 12 steps, you spot it, I see who you are. You spot it, you got it. Talking about projection, that often when I'm critical of another being, it's because that's some disown to my own being, my own behavior. And that's true. And, there's a and. Sometimes when we are being really pained by something we see in the world, it's not because it's pointing to an unhealed place within us, it's pointing to our wholeness. And that something that is such of deep value to us is being violated in the world. And it's a call. It's a call for us to find our purity of heart and see God. The path of heartbreak is for all of us. I know we don't like that part of it, but it's not the only path of our discovery, but it is part of it. Ram Dass says this, there is a relationship between what we need to learn and what we do in the world. It's interesting when you stop thinking of spiritual practices as what you do on your meditation cushion, and you realize that your karma is your dharma. In other words, what we do in the world, our dharma, is our spiritual practice. That the shape of your soul, the problems that you're seeing in the world, the things that are calling for your attention are the very ways of your own healing and the ways that you get to deliver part of the healing of humanity. How many of you heard, who said, become the change you wish to see in the world? Gandhi. Yeah, maybe that's a famous quote by him. I want to tell you a little bit about his story. Did you know, just like Christ was not the last name of Jesus of Nazareth, Mahatma is not Gandhi's first name. It's a title, and it literally means great soul. It's an honor that is given to very few people, both in Hinduism and Buddhism. His name is Mohandas, and he was born in 1869 to a middle caste family. They were tradesmen in their caste, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. His mother was illiterate, but incredibly impactful upon him for two reasons. She was very wise and had incredible common sense, and she was deeply devoted in her spiritual practice and path. And they made huge impressions on him. When his father died, Gandhi moved to England to study law. And there his brilliance was beginning to be recognized, and he was asked to translate the Bhagavad Gita, one of the most sacred texts in Hinduism. And that was then that he truly discovered his great love and passion for Hindu literature and scripture. It was also there that he began to study the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. And it was those two things. It was really the Gita, which talked about purpose and destiny, fulfilling one's purpose, and it was the teachings of Jesus, most notably the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes, that taught Gandhi about the importance of forgiveness and humility. After he finished law school, he went back to India for a time, but then he moved to South Africa, and he practiced law there. There's a sizable Indian population there in South Africa, and one day he was on the train, and a white man saw him sitting in first class and got him thrown off the train. And this kind of treatment, and here he was, a lawyer, dressed well, but he was brown-skinned. And this happened a lot to black and brown-skinned people in South Africa, if you know the history of that nation. And something awoke in Gandhi at that moment, that his heartbreak over that experience might be an opening for change in the world. And he began to study, and he began to teach, and he began to create a system of nonviolent protest, satyagraha, he called it, which literally translates to truth force. And for 21 years that he was in South Africa, he organized, he protested, and in the early 20th century laid much of the groundwork that Nelson Mandela was able later to step into to create change there. He came back to India in 1915 as not a hero, but a respected figure in social change. And the rest, he was no more practicing law. His work was now in social change. And if you know, or if you don't know, that at that time, India, this huge, vast space and population was owned by colonial Britain. It's just astounding to me that someone could just show up with a flag and say, this is ours, but that's the way it worked. If you have an army and a flag, you could just take what you wanted, I guess. And this was really, the people in India were oppressed by the system. And he began to organize and to continue his satyagraha, his peaceful demonstrations. And then it kind of culminated in 1930 in the Great Salt March. If you don't know this, it's an amazing story. The taxes on the Indian people were really onerous and really burdensome. And the salt tax was only less than 9% of the colonial income or revenues. And the other people who were organizing and protesting thought Gandhi was crazy for wanting to protest the salt tax. It's such a little thing. But Gandhi knew everybody needs salt on their food. And he also knew that the poor were more affected by this than anyone else. So he organized this 240-mile march to the sea. And at the sea, they were to distill and evaporate the water to make their own salt, which was illegal. Evidently, Great Britain owned the ocean too. And I don't know how many people, no one knows how many people joined that march, but tens and tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands. What we do know is that 60,000 people were arrested at the Salt March. 60,000 were arrested by colonial police. It was a huge turning point in the consciousness of India to overthrow colonial rule. Britain was not ready to let go. But something began to change. The people began to wake up. Some of the people began to act out violently. And there was a period where some British citizens were killed by the protesters, and Gandhi said, we're not ready. We're not ready for this yet. So he called off the revolution. And the people were heartbroken. But the British Empire saw this as an opening, and they invited him to London to work out a new deal where maybe the Indians could have more local say-so in government, but the British would still remain in power. And so he was there for 3 months. But you see, Gandhi knew who he was. He knew what he valued, and he wasn't there to make a deal. He was there to tell the truth. They tried to put him up in a fancy hotel. He said, no, I'm going to go live with the poor in the East End. He got an audience with King George, Queen Elizabeth's grandfather, in case you watched The Crown. And he was educated in London. He knew what the English expected and the royals expected in terms of decorum, and he showed up with his simple Indian wrap and sandals and walking stick. And many thought it was a great insult. Winston Churchill was outraged that he did this. One of the, it's an apocryphal story, I don't know if it's true, but it's said that King George, seeing this half-naked man in his palace, says, what do you think of Western civilization? And Gandhi is said to have replied, I think it would be a good idea. Eventually, England agreed to release all power over India. Victory, happily ever after. We know it's not the way it worked. There was still great division. Gandhi really wanted to keep India at the time whole, which included the large Muslim population in the north, which is now Pakistan. Because he really had a deep belief that Muslims and Hindus and Christians and Jews and Buddhists could live together in peace. This is the way. But that was not allowed. And so the separation, the division was codified by the splitting of the country. He also was a great advocate against the caste system of Hinduism. And as I said, he was kind of born in the middle of the caste system, but the lowest of the low, the untouchables, were treated horribly in Indian society, given the most menial, unsavory tasks and given no respect in society. And Gandhi saw their humanity and said, this has to stop. We must change this. And he met great resistance. You know, the people supported him, and they loved the idea of throwing off colonial rule, but to make the untouchables human, no, they didn't want that. He started a hunger strike just to protest and to draw attention to these schisms between Hindu and Muslim, between the castes. 10 days into that hunger strike, he was murdered by a high caste Hindu who did not want that part of the system overthrown. Karen and I were talking before the service. You know, we live in troubled times. And what I told her, and I don't mean to be dismissive, I said, and it was ever thus. Just different. There are different troubles that we're having now. But this idea that there was a golden past when it was all perfect, no, it's never been that way. I want to share with you that Gandhi knew, he was so deeply disappointed that his movement did not turn out the way he wanted. And two things that he claimed to help him get through this deep disappointment, and I'll be using them if the Astros lose tonight. Humor. That story that was told about the throne room of King George, if it's true or not, that is the way he was. And he said this, if I didn't have a sense of humor, I would have killed myself long ago. And spirituality in practice. This is from his autobiography. When every hope is gone, when helpers fail and comforts flee, I find that help does arrive somehow from I know not where. Supplication, worship, prayer are no superstition. They are acts more real than the acts of eating, drinking, sitting, or walking. It is no exaggeration to say that they alone are real. All else is unreal. So did Jesus and Gandhi fail or succeed in living their values into helping humanity to heal? I think it depends upon you and me. Will we take the work that they brought us for equality and freedom? And I mean personal freedom as well as freedom for oppressed people. Or will we throw up our hands in despair? What is the change you wish to see in your world? Be it. Join me in prayer. In this moment, connecting to the infinite life of God that is everywhere, flowing, revealing, creating, becoming. And I am a part of that life. And everyone within the sound of my voice is a unique, irreplaceable, unrepeatable part of that life of God. Each of us uniquely called and gifted to bring who we are for the healing of the whole. And so at this moment, knowing this truth of unity and of power, I speak my word over this community, over these people, over myself, that we are willing to become the change we wish to see. That we are willing to see beyond the tragedy and the disappointment to the greater reality that something good is happening here. Something new wants to be born in the world and in us. And we trust the shape of our soul, the things that matter most to us. We listen and we live those values into our lives, into our families, into our choices, into our words, into our actions in a way that sends ripples of healing beyond our knowing and comprehension. And what I remember in this moment is there is nothing but God. There is nothing but the spiritual reality of truth and of power. I will not be dissuaded from this by the appearances. I know the truth. God is here. All is well. I am grateful, releasing this word, trusting that it is already being acted upon by that beautiful law, the great servant of mind. It is done, it is so, and so it is. Amen. Boy, if you don't know how wonderful you are, I wish you could stand here and see you. If no one has told you today they love you, I love you. God bless you. Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.